Lecture 6, Regulations. I have seen many important innovations stalled or killed by the mismanagement of the regulations pertaining to an innovation. Where innovators need to start is with a clear understanding of what in fact is your innovation. Is it a drug, a medical device, a cosmetic, a nutritional supplement, a food, a consumer product, maybe a combination? And then you need to understand the global differences if your plan is to have a truly global innovation. In North America, some of the most important regulatory bodies include Health Canada, the US FDA, environmental regulators, the FTC or Federal Trade Commission in the US, or in Canada, the Competition Bureau, plus a variety of state or provincial or even local regulators. Even in the concept stage of an innovation, you need to be thinking about what regulatory approvals or pathways you're going to need to follow. And you better think of all of them. If you don't understand this early on, storm clouds may be on the horizon. Correctly understanding the regulatory classification will dictate how you design, manufacture, label, and advertise your innovation. It will determine critical lead times, data required, clinical studies, and other aspects that are hugely important in moving your innovation to market. People who have only worked in the private sector often have a very misplaced understanding of regulatory bodies like Health Canada or the US FDA. These are enormous and complex bureaucracies run by governments. Of the many things that make a regulator's life difficult is that governments change constantly and mandates and direction can and do change. I decided to use this cruise ship as an analogy to a large government department. First of all, they tend to move slowly. Second, they are very difficult to steer and change course. And like a cruise ship, it can be very difficult to find the person or persons who will be in charge of your innovations file once it's submitted. Also, unlike the private sector, government regulators have no stake in your financial success whatsoever. They have a stake only in enforcing laws and regulations and keeping their citizens safe. The fact that you have made a commitment to your investors to launch by a certain date is not only irrelevant, but any pressure applied like this can work against you. In this slide, I tried to capture very simplistically what an organization chart at Health Canada could look like, recognizing all major regulatory organizations are more or less like this. In Canada, at the top of the heap is the Minister of Health, who is a politician, and they can change every 4 to 5 years. This person is followed by a deputy minister, followed by assistant deputy ministers, and then a massive organization underneath in all these silos. Knowing who in this organization has a stake in your approval, how they think and work, can be the difference between success and failure or short or lengthy approval processes for your innovation. To give you an example, several years ago, I was called in to advise on the approval of a new drug. It had been under review by the regulator for more than 4 years. The company was making no progress, and the regulator was constantly asking for more data. There were endless meetings. I invited myself to one of these meetings, and I was appalled by what I saw. The company lectured the regulator, berated them for not moving faster, and didn't ask for any clarification or issues. All of the bureaucrats in the room stared at their shoelaces for an hour while they were lectured by the company's regulatory and legal departments. After a few days, I had a private meeting with the regulatory agency. I asked them, "Are you ever going to approve this new drug?" I was told, "Absolutely not." So I said, "Well, why didn't you tell the company years ago?" And I was told, "It's because they never asked." Many innovators developing new drugs, medical devices, nutritional supplements, and even foods completely fail to recognize the importance of these other regulatory bodies. In the United States, the Federal Trade Commission, and in Canada, the Competition Bureau, are serious regulatory bodies that have to be understood and respected. These are, in fact, law enforcement agencies. Their jurisdiction includes misleading advertising, anti-competitive behavior, and exaggerated claims made about products. While innovators are often fearful of the FDA or Health Canada, they have every right to be very fearful of these organizations. Since they are law enforcement agencies, the legislation they operate under allows for fines and even imprisonment of the officers of the company. There have been cases where the FDA or Health Canada have been dealing with issues, but a company or even an entire industry keeps bending the rules. If the FTC or Competition Bureau get involved, the fireworks can start. If you are ever in the unfortunate position of receiving correspondence from these regulatory bodies, call the best lawyer you can find and assemble your crisis management team. When it comes to working with regulatory agencies, relationships are important, and building trust is very important. If you're not sure about anything, the regulatory classification, how to gain approvals, you need to organize pre-submission meetings. Meet with a regulator and make them part of your success plan. Also, when dealing with regulatory agencies, you need to learn to stop talking and listen. This is not an exercise of ramming your innovation through a regulator. This is a matter of learning carefully from people who are experts, and if engaged properly, will help guide you through the process. You need to watch for changes in staffing and reorganizations. These happen frequently. If you don't know your way around the regulatory hurdles, get expert legal and regulatory advisors who do. Make it part of your job to know the federal, state, provincial, or local regulations that affect your innovation. Regulations change, and have somebody monitor those. Also, be aware of publicity and news media covering your area of innovation. These can and do affect how regulators perceive the risk of some categories of products and their overall willingness to approve new innovations. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for my next lecture on patents.